There on the screen, we can see the casket of former President Jimmy Carter exiting the Carter Center there in Atlanta, Georgia. It's quite beautiful, actually. There's all these different ceremonies as the former president is, continuing his route to D.C. Skyler, I want to jump ahead to Thursday, and that's when the services at the Capitol conclude. What happens after Thursday?
So what we will see, and as you're watching the casket of the 39th president be put inside of the hearse before it is taken to Dobbins Air Force Base, what we will see on Thursday and after Thursday is that major state funeral where we anticipate, again, President Biden to deliver that eulogy. After that, his body will then be taken to Andrews Air Force Base once again. From there, he will be brought back here to Georgia. And many that we have spoken with here over the course of the last 8, 9, 10 days or so have just talked about what he has meant for the state of Georgia. And that's everyone from Governor Brian Kemp here in the state to Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens, and others who have really talked about and lauded the work that he has been able to do to go from small town Plains to the big city of Atlanta and obviously up to Washington, D.C. But after that service, we will then see the late president's body be taken to Maranatha Baptist Church down in Plains, Georgia. There will be another small service there, short service where we will hear from more members of the Carter family before he is then will be taken to their family home and be buried next to his wife, Rosalind, just outside of the family home next to the lake there, where he will, spend, and that will be the end of it. And so we think that this is, one final time for so many here at the Carter Center to pay their respects. Many of the people that we have spoken with said that they grew to know the Carters intimately with their work. A lot of them that we spoke with talked about how the late president and his wife Rosalind did so much for them on an intimate level, whether that helping grow their families or taking them to Atlanta Braves baseball games or, other parts of their daily lives, and how they will grow to miss him and miss them, but really sort of continue the work as it relates to the Carter Center. That is one thing that we have asked several people as you see the casket being brought to the hearse there. We've asked what happens next with the Carter Center. And the officials here have indicated that they are well funded, they are well resourced to continue a lot of that work. Remember, Liz, this is a group that has a footprint just about all over the world with more than 3,000 employees and volunteers all across the globe. More than 300 people work here in Atlanta. But they've grown to do so many different things, whether that work to eradicate the guinea worm disease or trachoma, which is a bacterial eye infection, and so many different things. And so now we will see how members of the Carter Center will continue their work. We've heard from senior advisors and the CEO of the Carter Center all saying that they want to continue the work in the name of the Carters. And so I think that is something that will continue to be the case. I think a lot of people here in Georgia obviously recognize the work that has been done around the world in terms of what the Carters have stood for, and they say that good job, Mr. President, but they also say the mission still remains, and that's to try to help make the world a better place.
Yes, in an interview, Jimmy Carter once said when given the choice between 4 more years in the White House or the Carter Center, he said he would choose the Carter Center. And I just want to note there what you see there on your screen, the casket of the former president, which is loaded onto that hearse where it will be joined by a motorcade and make its way to the Atlanta airport. And we're going to be following this sequence of ceremonies as the former president makes his way to Washington, D.C., where he will lie in state there at the nation's capital. And Skyler, you had an opportunity to be in the community for the past couple of days, and you've spoken with people who really knew the former president personally, or definitely saw his impact there in the community. What stuck out to you?
just the fact that they called him Mr. Jimmy. You know, I think so many times, especially in a post-presidency environment, we see these former leaders of the free world sort of surrounded by Secret Service and surrounded by so many law enforcement officials that you can't really get close to them. But every story that we've heard from, whether that here in Atlanta or for the people down in Plains, they've all sort of said that they would, you know, just run into Jimmy Carter at the grocery store, at the dollar store, at a restaurant. He was widely known for traveling coach in terms of via the airlines. And so, you know, I think just his personal touch that so many people really said they really grew to know over the course of the last several decades. And a lot of the people that we spoke with here happen to be in town for different reasons, whether that folks coming in town to watch their teams play in college football championship games or playoff games, I should say, or people who lived in the neighborhood but never really found themselves coming to the Carter Center, all saying that they wanted to take time to pay their respects to the 39th president, because this was one of those guys that you felt like would be around forever. You know, 100 years is certainly a long time to be around, but Jimmy Carter is someone who really meant so much to the state of Georgia. And the other thing, too, Liz, that's interesting is that when we spoke with people who were from those small towns who did decide to come to the Carter Center to pay their respects, they said that he represented possibilities because, you know, Plains is a town made up of less than 600 people. It does not have a stoplight in that town. And to say that, yes, he made that 140-mile journey from Plains, Georgia to Atlanta to represent his community on the state Senate level and then obviously as governor back in 1970, it really was, okay, we can do this. We have the opportunity to really sort of build ourselves up. And that is something that the Carters represented in many ways as they went to the White House. And if you hear and listen to the journey and the documentation of how he came to be and the things that he wanted to accomplish on so many different levels, you really say, oh, okay, this is a person who knew what he stood for, knew what he was about, but also wanted to do it with the grace and dignity of you know, as it relates to his faith and his Christianity. And so I think that was something that is very interesting that we've heard from people over the course of the last week or so, is just the fact that so many people recognized his work, but recognized his journey, also what he stood for and the possibilities that were out there. And also, you know, that what we were able to see in that second act, as I pointed out earlier, just in terms of his work to host world leaders here in Atlanta at the Carter Center, to really try to work out peace agreements and deals, and then also what he was able to do in the name of health. I think that is something that was incredibly touching. I actually just went to the sign that we've been standing in front of since we've been out here at the Carter Center to see all of the handwritten notes all saying, "Thank you, Mr. President." It's very touching, Liz, to see the bags and jars of peanuts, obviously, with Carter being a peanut farmer. We've seen helmets representing his work with Habitat for Humanity. There's also Panamanian flags talking about the work that President Carter did as it relates to the Panama Canal. And really, there's all sort of touchstones along those signs there, really sort of reflecting the life and legacy of the 39th president. And we are looking now at the casket, getting ready to take off inside of the circle of flags, as it's referred to here at the Carter Center, as the casket is getting ready to be part of a motorcade, as it will be taken to Dobbins Air Force Base here in Atlanta. It's just outside of the city, maybe about a 20-25 minute drive from where we are right now. From there will be a small ceremony, and then he will be taken to Washington, D.C. to continue on that journey. As I pointed out, there will be another small ceremony at Andrews Air Force Base before the president's body will be taken to the U.S. Navy Memorial just down the street from the U.S. Capitol before he lies in state at the U.S. Capitol. We then anticipate a another service this afternoon where, Liz, you and I have talked about. We anticipate eulogies from Vice President Kamala Harris, along with Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Speaker Mike Johnson and a few others, as members of the Carter family will also be there in attendance as we begin the next chapter, if you will, as part of this state funeral, as we continue to look on at the Carter Center there in reflection and remembrance of the 39th president.
And this is the first of a series of events, as you mentioned, Skyler, that's going to happen today and then throughout the week. And we will stay with those events and bring them to you live throughout the day and throughout the week. And of course, culminating with his funeral on Thursday. Skyler Henry, thank you so much for staying with us through all of this, and we will check in with you a little bit later in the show. And we have coverage of Jimmy Carter's funeral ceremonies all day and, of course, for the rest of the week. Be sure to stream us at 2 p.m. Eastern for a special report once President Jimmy Carter arrives in Washington to begin his state funeral.